we have Nathan Murphy and Vinny Perth with us to reflect on, this is the seismic story for Irish football. Vinny, I'll get to you in a second. What more details do we have, Nathan, today, 24 hours on, about how this all played out?
Just that it was very sudden, that the plan was to prepare for tonight's game down in Waterford as normal. Shelbourne are well used to these Friday, Monday double headers. There was obviously quite a lot of conversation, I think, internally amongst the playing group after Friday night, and perhaps a sense that Duff had gone that little bit too far in terms of his criticism of the players. And I'm sure there would have been some expectation that there'd be a continuation of that at training yesterday. And it's clear, even when the rumours first started going around at lunchtime, that an awful lot of people weren't aware that this had happened or that there was any possibility of this happening. But it seems it's done, it's set in stone. I like a lot thought, well, listen, this is a bit rash, it's a bit impetuous, and when he sits down the cold light of day and has conversations with the owners and the people running Shelbourne, that they'll be able to convince him to change his mind, because there's a lot of shock around this. But the main shock is the timing. To do this 24 hours before a game, just over 2 weeks before a Champions League campaign, Shelbourne's first Champions League campaign in 20 years, it feels to go against an awful lot of what Damien Duff has spoken about over the last 3 years, and particularly even the last few weeks when it's been tough, and about everyone having to stick together. Like, Shelbourne are left right now reeling and in a very, very difficult position, just a couple of weeks out from one of the most important games in their modern history, considering what's at stake financially. But listen, shocked by the timing, maybe not surprised because of the recent form, recent comments, and I guess the unique circumstances that Duff is in as a manager in the Premier League, or Premier Division, or was in, shall we say, in the Premier Division.
Yeah, past tense.
Yeah, well, I'd say that, Vinny, very keen to hear your thoughts. We haven't heard you yet, and that was exactly it. Nathan summed it up there. I imagine you were shocked, but I'm asking as well, how surprised were you at the same time?
Funny enough, wasn't shocked, and I don't think loads of people in the league are necessarily. I mean, in the inner sort of circles of the league that would sort of hear different things or speak or be around Damien's company in different situations. So I wasn't overly shocked in terms of, you could see the hurt. You could see maybe, and I don't want to be disrespectful to him, but maybe some of his actions, I don't think, he's always been quite brash. Nathan will know that more than anybody interviewing him, but it's always been, when I say brash, I mean not afraid to say what he's feeling. But he may have crossed the line once or twice in the last month with a couple of things that have ramifications in terms of his playing squad, in terms of his relationships with other people, and he's obviously found that really difficult to deal with. And Nathan gives me a bit of stick about this at times on the pod, but I think it just shows the importance of the right people around you. And I don't mean necessarily Joey O'Brien as assistant manager. I just mean when you're so big like Damien is in terms of the stature and the character in our league, did he have enough people around him? You wonder, just to grab a hold of him and say, just shut up for a couple of weeks, put your head, send other people out to do the interviews for a week or two. And that's sort of what I've been hearing over the last week or two. People who know him really well saying he just needs to come away for a couple of days and let other people take the heat.
Yeah, exactly. If there was an option somehow to have a breather rather than leave, I'm sure he would have taken it, or would he? Because it is surprising. Like, he did point out on Friday night, lads, that they've only won 2 in a row the first 2 games of the season, so he's been very unhappy with their consistency or lack of. But it was only a week ago that they beat Pats away 1-0, and it was that night as well, Vinny, where he was talking about how much he loves his players and his staff there, and they're his only friends in football. And then 6 days later, he kind of walks out on them, and it's hard to believe it's just because of that Derry City result on Friday gone. But at the same time, he's saying things like that last Monday, but for you, it's not a surprise. So this is all a bit of a conundrum.
It is, yeah, and it is. But then trying to understand Damien, I've spoken before on the show about him, is not easy. He's a complex character. Lucky enough to spend couple of years in a sort of presence doing our pro license together, and he's a complex character. He overthinks stuff a little bit, but that's what's made him special. That's what's made him what he is. He's dragged average players and made them top class players. He's made them champions, and that's what makes him brilliant. But some will say there's a shelf life of managing that way, constantly at people, constantly putting them under pressure. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not sure. The comments on Friday were a little bit over the line, and there's a long way back when you upset players like that. And some will say, well, players need to get over it. But you are managing 20, 25 people on a daily basis, and the pressure that came with that is ultimately a lot to take. And there's the other side of it is that, and I've spoken to Nathan, and we've spoken about this on the pod a little bit, and have tried to involve this year, and it hasn't worked on the pitch. And I presume he's taken that personally as well in terms of the results. So there's a huge amount going on and all of that stuff. And ultimately, we don't know exactly the discussions that happened after Friday night's performance, but there seems to be a lot went on after Friday.
There is probably, as much as there's a shelf life to Duff's managerial style and how he's able to motivate players, there's probably a shelf life to how long those players can be motivated for as well. There's a reason that a lot of those players hadn't achieved that level consistently over their career. And maybe the second they took the foot off the gas once the league title was settled, or even before that, when suddenly they were starting to get a few pats on the back, that Duff has been fighting against that and railing against that for, as Arthur said just before, going on a year. I had a quick look there. I think it was about 10 wins in 31 league games since the beginning of July of last year. So it does seem he's just really struggled to keep the connection with the dressing room, and he was never going to just take a break and take a holiday, and he obviously was not happy with even people taking a mid-season break, but I think we all felt maybe he needed it as much as anybody, because it was relentless. Even just look at those last 10 days, lads. Look at those last 10 days of what happened after the game against Shamrock Rovers and the continuation of the back and forth with Stephen Bradley, and obviously caught on camera, and you have no class and all of that, to 3 days later, he's bowing down in front of the Shell supporters after they get a win. And then the criticism on Friday night, and there was 3 or 4 separate interviews that he doubled down in each of them in terms of what he looked at as a lack of professionalism. I really went to town at his players. And that's just in the space of 10 days. There was more storylines in that than there was for years in the league. And if you're in a dressing room listening to that, and he's probably gone as far as he can go, maybe it just comes to a natural end. But it's just the timing couldn't be worse.
Yeah, and I think it's important, if you don't mind, just real quickly, to almost defend the players and to say to you that he came, to make this point, that he came away from tactically what he was doing last year, what made them great, Nathan. And it's not that the players had necessarily given up on him, it's and his intensity. Tactically, they came away from what made them big champions last year. I think it's important to point that out to the defender, the players. I mean, the way they played last year is not completely different, but it's certainly different than what they did this year. Obviously, it's had a lot of injuries as well as other managers. But I think it's important to defend the players a little bit. It's not that they didn't reach Damien's standards every single day. It's also that Duff changed the way he played with his team. And ultimately, there's been ramifications for that.
But those ramifications, it seems, from the outside, are too severe. That actually, to your point, if there had been somebody around him who was older and wiser and had been through some of this stuff before, might have been able to say, these are growing pains, and this season, because you're trying to evolve your style into something that will hopefully go toe for toe with Rovers over the next couple of seasons, there's going to be difficulties with that. And you need to decide what you're going to do in Europe and plot your way through it. And this is you becoming a great manager, being able to back things up. Now, there are questions about what Damien's future in the game are going to be, because how do you come back from this? Like, he's going to have to take it a long time away and come back and convince everybody that he's learned the lessons of what's just happened.
There's two answers to that. First one is, I think it's a great lesson for. I remember when I was a young coach, I'd listen to Off the Ball quite a lot, and you think of people like just listening to the managers come on and always look for little nuggets. And there's a great nugget in this. You think Stuart Lancaster talking to yourself and stuff like that. I know I would have picked up a lot at that time. The great nugget in this is, and again, it's not about Joey O'Brien. It's about having somebody remember, Damien is so big, somebody to throw a few F-bombs at you on Friday night after the game and go, before you go to the press, just think about this, send someone else out, take the night off, just get out of the ground, go away and we'll talk about it later. And someone has to almost be a stronger character than Damien to do that, or with nothing to lose. So I think that's a really important lesson for a lot of people in management. It's something I took from over the weekend. But then the second side of it is, I get the point of that. I've already seen some articles this morning where they're quite critical of Damien in terms of his future. But if I'm owning the club in League of Ireland in the next 12, 18 months, Damien Duff is right on top of my list. Now, the problem with that is what he said and how much he's a Shelbourne man is a problem, but he's right on top of my list with almost every club.
Well,
do you like or not?
But Vinny, that's all well and good for clubs wanting him, but like you say already, he's on record saying several times that Shels are his only love. He's not going to manage anyone else in the League of Ireland. He doesn't want to manage abroad. He said in the past he didn't want the Ireland job. It's just Shels, right? So he's backed himself into this corner. But I guess the question I have is, like, you run about lessons being learned there. Does he even want to learn lessons? Does he want to change the way he is? Like, one of the quotes he had on Friday night was particularly striking, I thought, was, you can grab every player down here now and ask the same question. Is it Duffer that drives everything? As in referring to himself in the third person, Duffer. It is, and it's getting tiring, but most importantly, it gets frustrating. I mean, was he too open in terms of how much he enjoyed the job and too emotionally attached to it and taking everything personally, so that this actually isn't that much of a shock considering how he's been conducting himself to this point?
I don't know. Look, Nathan interviews and he can answer that probably better than me. Can I just give you one example? Johnny Sexton only released a book recently where he said he wouldn't coach, etc., etc. He's away currently with the Lions. Life is short. We move on very quickly.
Yeah, I think, listen, we're right in the heart of it now, but football managers are full of contradictions and hypocrisies, and I think Duff would find it very easy after a break to go in somewhere else and say the exact same things about somebody else and throw himself into a job, because that's what he's. I think if Duff takes a job, it's going to be a job he feels that he can do a similar job to Shelbourne at. He's going to go in and want that control of the playing squad. He's going to want to put his heart and soul into it. He's going to want that thing that he was so proud of, I think, with Shels, that, you know, kept him awake late at night and it got him up early in the morning. We're talking about a man who is in a very unique circumstance in that, I won't say he was bigger than the club, but the club certainly needed him more than he needed that job. And he got the sense that in his early 40s, probably with more money than you could ever imagine, he needed something to get him out of bed in the morning, something that he could be obsessed with and allowed to be obsessed with. And that's what Shels gave him. And give him a break, and I suspect all of the positives of what he's taken from the Shels job could be fresh in his mind, and he'd be looking at what that next challenge is. Now, there's not many challenges in Ireland aside from one of Shelbourne's direct rivals. So if a Bohemians job comes up again, or if eventually the Shamrock Rovers job, where obviously there's a long-term connection, you know, his name would certainly be in the mix, and he will unquestionably be the favourite to take over when Stephen Bradley eventually leaves Shamrock Rovers. But, you know, you're going to have to swallow some pride if he wants to do that. Does it have an impact on the Ireland job? Potentially. I'd imagine there's quite a few in the FAI who wouldn't need a second excuse to deny Duff the chance of managing Ireland whenever that opportunity comes up. And maybe, again, you can point to this of, well, you left the Ireland job in fairly sudden circumstances. You left the Shelbourne job in fairly sudden circumstances. And we don't need that risk here with the biggest job in the country. But I think he believed everything he said about Shelbourne and his love for Shelbourne. I think that idea that he would die for the club and he would die for his players, I think he truly did believe that. But that's management, and you gotta believe it, and you gotta get your players to believe it. And he's done it better than anybody over the last couple of years with the way he's helped Shelbourne rise. But I don't think that means he couldn't do it somewhere else.
If a side, Nathan, offers him a job that doesn't necessarily need Duff, they're giving him the opportunity and they're paying him very well, so that's probably going to be abroad. Do you imagine that we're going to see the same Damien Duff?
I think that's Damien Duff, isn't it? I never knew this Damien Duff at all until he came into the Shelbourne job, and the few dealings would have had him as a player. You never got the sense that this character was going to be there, and I would be surprised if he went over and was the manager of Derby County just because the money was good. I think, and again, maybe I'm contradicting myself in that it's only a month or so ago that I was over in Talca Park and he was giving a press conference and his son Woody was in the room and he's pointing at Woody as like, this is why I'm here. The kids are here. The family is here. I don't want to be anywhere else. And again, a unique part of this was that it didn't feel as though it was a stepping stone. He wasn't last November going, all right, this is my CV filled out. You have that CV and you have his reputation as a player. And again, he's going to be able to get a really good job over in England. Like, I think you have to believe him when he says that wasn't the ambition of what he was trying to achieve with Shelbourne. So is he just going to take the next job on offer because he has the management bug? Oh, I don't think so.
Vinny, it sounds like you feel he was just a bit burnt out at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to talk about Damien because he's such a complex character, but it looked that way. It looked... He didn't look he didn't look himself, for want of a better word, on the sideline. You can see that with managers have obviously been through that. It's really difficult. He looked... There was times he was too quiet on the line, and then there was times he just took things too far a little bit. So, yeah, it just looked like a lot of us could see this coming. We could see this coming, and the people that could see it coming most are probably the ones that sort of knew him best. And any discussions I had with people, they sort of felt. And look, results change everything. If they'd won the last 4 games, Damien's still in charge there, but they haven't. And things have gone up and down. So it just felt, yeah. And it goes back to managing players and people. And if you get out of the car every single day going into your workplace and the manager's that intense, or it is difficult to work in that environment. And maybe there was a bit of a disconnect at times with him and the players over the last little while, where when you it's all right to do that, but when you go publicly slaughter players, it's difficult to come back from that.
Vinny, the League of Ireland has seen a significant increase in popularity over the last few years. There's loads of factors to it. Damien Duff is certainly one of them. What's the impact on the league now?
Oh, it's massive. It's a massive blow for the league. We had a league before Damien that was building nicely, but he took it on to a new level. And anyone that doesn't think that's happened is in Cloud Cuckoo land. He's taken us into the sort of the biggest news story. And when you look what's happened over the weekend from a sporting point of view, what you would have had planned for the show, the fact that Damien has left is huge news. I've seen most of the papers this morning. It's back page on all of them. It's on front pages of some of them. He's a huge character. It's a huge blow to our league. What he's done for it, it is absolutely massive what he's done for League of Ireland. And anyone that doubts that doesn't understand the world we live in. So it's a hammer blow for the league in many ways. Damien Duff and Champions League football sounds right. It sounds great together. I'm really good that he's not taking Shels into the Champions League. I really wanted to see that. I think they've got a massive opportunity, and therefore it's a big blow for Shels as a football club. But this is a real blow for us as a league, absolutely.
And do they just give it to Joey O'Brien now to take them through the qualifying, because it's very close, or do you try and get somebody who has a big character to come in and re-energise the group, go back to basics from what they were doing last season? It's such a tricky scenario for the people who are running the club.
It's a difficult one because it depends on if Joey's more the same. Well, that's not good, because it feels like Shels need to try something a little bit different, whether that's going back to the way they played last year. But Joey O'Brien is so highly regarded in the game that it feels like he is the right person to take the club on, but he has to want it. And the amount of Damien has created a huge amount of loyalty with his inner workings of his team. You'd imagine he's been so good to them people that work with him, that not every assistant manager likes to stay around when the manager leaves in these circumstances. So the decision you probably feel is maybe Joey's. If he wants it, I think he'll get it. I hope he gets it in many ways, because we're hearing a lot of good things about him. So it's an interesting one.
Nathan, what do you think?
Well, I think the way that Duff always spoke about Joey O'Brien, you always got the sense that they were very aligned, that they were both trying to push as hard as they possibly could with the players. And that would obviously give the impression that it would be a continuation of Duff's style. But, I'm sure Vinny knows better than anybody. As an assistant manager, you have to row in behind what your manager is doing, certainly publicly and on the training ground. And maybe Joey O'Brien would have a very different way of going about things if he was the number one. As you say, anyone you talk to around Shelbourne or around Irish football always only has good things to say about Joey O'Brien. And the fact it's come as it has mid-season, I think works in his favour as well. I'm going to head down to Waterford tonight for the game, and I'll be interested to talk to Shelbourne supporters as they have time to digest this as to what their feeling is. Because again, 2 weeks out from a Champions League game that could have a massive bearing on the long-term future of the club in terms of the financial benefits if they were to win that and give themselves a real opportunity to qualify for the group stage of what would ultimately end up in the group stage of the Conference League, as to how unsettling this might be. But maybe the form was so poor anyways in recent weeks that this might spark something in them over the next fortnight. If it's not Joey O'Brien, the name that's obviously going to be thrown around is Kevin Doherty, with what he's done at Shelbourne, with his connection, or with what he's done at Drogheda and his connection with Shelbourne, and the fact that I'm sure he's not in the best frame of mind around things either at the moment. But you'd have to say it feels like it's going to be Joey O'Brien. But Joey is his own man as well, and may well feel that have been so strongly linked with Duff that get through these couple of games and then see what the lay of the land is.
Vinny, just one more from me. Was Damien Duff right to leave right now if he felt it was the right choice for him? And what I mean by that is, should he have been more responsible and stayed until the Champions League rounds were done because of the money on the line and how much of an impact he has in Shels?
That's difficult. Like, I feel like the answer to that is Damien has to look after himself. It's such an incredibly difficult job.
Yeah.
Management, the scrutiny that comes with it. People like Damien and Stephen Kenny throws this out as well. They don't read stuff, they don't see stuff. They see everything, they hear everything. It's incredible, noisy world we live in now. There's a pressure with that. He felt like he lost a battle with Bradley that time. That wouldn't have hurt him. I know it's a nothing argument, but it felt like he lost that one. He hasn't had the moral high ground in a lot of things over the last while, so maybe it is the right time for him to step away. He's got to look after himself and his own sort of personal space. But it goes back to the point, it's a huge blow for Shelbourne because we've mentioned it before, but real quickly, like, the prize money at stake by beating Linfield is massive. The opportunity to be a Conference League side is huge for an Irish team. Last year, obviously Shamrock Rovers got there with a quality squad, but the champions of Northern Ireland and Wales both got conference football with a result of millions and millions in the bank, and that sets Shels up for the next 4 or 5 years as a result of it. So the next month is huge for that football club, and him not being there is a hammer blow.
And sorry, one last point of this, which I haven't seen spoken about. The fact that Drogheda aren't in Europe means that there's not a third team adding to the league's coefficient, which means that there's a possibility we fall further behind, or at least the opportunity for us to jump forward and get more teams into Europe and further on in the competitions. Like, that's actually a complicating factor in all this, that these games now matter not just for Shels, but for the league as well.
Yeah, but I think the work Shamrock Rovers has done over the last few years will mitigate that a little bit. I think there's an outside chance now because of the draw. Rovers may get another conference this year. It will definitely be harder because they're not on the Champions route. But yeah, it's just not good. It's not good. The timing is not good from a Shelbourne point of view. And there will be some fans hurt as a result of that. But he's got to look after himself. As I said, there's Duffer, like, it's one of the biggest games of the year as Bows and Rovers tonight, and the story is Damien Duff. He's done it again. Fair play to him.
Look after himself is an interesting line, I think, as well, because I wonder when he woke up on Saturday morning, and he used to sort of make a joke of this over the last year, of his wife would be like, what have you said this time, when they'd pick up the papers on a Saturday. And he knew, as you say, he was so aware of how his words were being presented and what he was saying and the impact it had. But the last few weeks has definitely felt different, and the fallout with Bradley had certainly got nastier and more personal, I think, than anybody expected. And remember, it was just a general back and forth. And look, Duff obviously took massive offence to Bradley saying that Damien can get a little bit emotional at times. But I was there in Tala the night when Duff walked straight down the tunnel, and I was actually sitting right behind his dugout. And it was just a normal Damien Duff experience. He was at his players. He was at the fourth official, the referee, as he and all the other managers are. And it didn't feel like there was much niggle or anything in the game, and certainly not enough for him to walk straight down the tunnel. So it was clearly because of the comments beforehand. But I know people around were very surprised by his decision not to shake hands that night. They mightn't feel like anything, but again, it's just continued from there, and the obviously being caught on camera and the roaring of the no class. And then I do wonder if he woke up on Friday morning or on Saturday morning and was reading his own comments back and thought, okay,
sorry,
I've gone
real
too
quickly,
far.
Can I just throw in before I understand it's a big weekend sports-wise, but just on Damien, like I obviously have had a private conversation with Damien in the last number of weeks, and the impression people have is he's cold, he's this, he's that. He felt it was important that the two of us had a private conversation, but something went on between the two of us. Between that and stuff, he helped me with a pro license. He's a great fella, like, but he has this persona where it's all about Shelbourne and fighting for his team. I'm okay with that, but be under no illusions, there's a lot of good. Like, he's a really great fella, and what you see is not necessarily what you get with Damien. He fought for Shelbourne, fought tooth and nail, won them in the league title, dragged them over the line. And I understand there's a bit of hurt with him leaving, and he's upset a lot of people in other clubs. But he's ultimately a great, great person. And I think he's a big blow to our league.
Vinny, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Nathan, enjoy the trip to Waterford tonight. And obviously, we will wait to see what comes out of that.